This is Capital City with Capital J.
It's the Capital City Podcast. I'm your host, Capital J, alongside my main man,
DL Glass.
We're in the building today, and today's show is all about the D to the R to the U to the G to the S.
D-Rugs.
D-Rugs. For those of you not in the know, those are drugs. We're going to be talking about drugs and music.
Do they go together?
Oh, man, do they go together. I would almost say that you've never heard a song you liked that didn't have at least one person on it involved with it that was high on something.
Right.
Whether it be the last guy who put his final engineering touches on it or the first guy who wrote the very first verse, somebody was probably high on something at some point.
But we about to do this episode without pre-gaming.
Nah, we doing this episode absolutely straight. You know what I'm saying? Tonight's episode is brought to you by water, cold water.
Okay.
So here we go. Now, we start here like we start everywhere else. We're going to go back to the beginning, DL.
Okay.
Let's just talk about music in general. And, you know, we talk about hip-hop music, okay? Mm-hmm. So we're going to go back to shortly before hip-hop because we don't want to go back too far.
Right.
So far that we're not even in the hip-hop era.
Right.
Okay. So the connection between drugs and music. You saw the movie Ray, right?
Yes, sir.
So we saw that even back then, you know, artists were using drugs
Yes.
and performing.
Yes.
At least we know Ray Charles was. Yeah. And I know that during that, you know, there was a time Miles Davis used to experiment. You know, these are jazz musicians. Mm-hmm. And, well, blues, jazz, rhythm and blues. Mm-hmm. You know, the early days, you had a few artists that would experiment with heroin, maybe a little cocaine, some marijuana.
Right.
But society wasn't really leaning towards drugs as, you know, in great, huge numbers during that time period because prohibition hadn't been but so long, you know, since it had ended and people were still in drinking mode. Mm-hmm. You know? So think about all the music that came about during the drinking era. You know, rocking and rolling and juke joints and, you know, that music gets you going. You know, you party and party.
Right.
But one thing about people who drink, you know, they get going, but there's this violent energy with it, too, that you had to deal with when there's alcohol involved.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Now, since there wasn't a whole lot of hip-hop around, you know, I'm trying to think, where did all this violent drinking energy go? Probably into the development of rock and roll. You know?
Yeah.
I would just have to imagine.
Right.
Now, as hip-hop comes into fashion, it's the early 70s. Mm-hmm. We're coming off an era where the Flower Children had taken over everything. Hippies, you know, late 60s. It was an era of mind expansion. LSD, mushrooms.
Right.
And, you know, if you think about the music from the late 60s and you think about how much was going on in one song. Like today a song, like I'm going to give you a little history, ladies and gentlemen. Today you listen to a song on the radio, it's the same beat from beginning to end. When people were doing LSD, tripping on acid and all that stuff.
Couldn't be.
No, song lasted 15 minutes.
Right.
You had a 5-minute drum solo in the middle of it.
Yes.
Now, so, you know, I'm giving you the background of how we're going to break this thing down. Mm-hmm. So people out here doing acid, right?
Right.
The music is reflecting what's going on in their head. Mm-hmm. And I've never taken acid, but I've seen depictions of people taking acid, and they always seem to throw eye characters and shapes and all this stuff into the room. And when you think about a song from the era when people were using that type of drug more commonly than they do today and recording music, the music reflected that totally.
Even the dance.
Yeah, it was just everything. Right. You know, you be going one direction, then you go another direction, then you go here.
Right.
And then you go here. And that's what the music did. Like, if you ever listen to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, you go back and listen to that and just look at how many places that song went, or listen to some Fifth Dimension, you know, and it's when you listen to that Phil Spector had a sound, they called it, I forgot what they called it, but the sound, it was like so much stuff going on, but it all worked.
Right.
And that's, you know, to me, that is the sound of acid.
It made me think of a group like Earth, Wind, and Fire.
In the early days of Earth, Wind, and Fire, they totally looked like hippies and flower children.
Man.
The very first Earth, Wind, and Fire album that I have had Keep Your Head to the Sky on there, I think.
How long was it?
Your head to the sky. And then, like, think about the creativity that went into Earth, Wind, and Fire music. They're obviously from that era.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? They're from the era of the Flower Children, and their music carried that legacy of over-the-top instrumentation, 10-minute songs, flips from one style of music right into the next within the same song. Like, listen to September, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like, today a producer would turn that into 10 different songs.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Just the intro itself would be a song. Dum, 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 dum. Somebody would take that and sample it and turn it into a whole song.
Because
by itself.
The bass guitar was over there doing his own thing, but kept to the tempo.
Yeah, and it's always flipping.
Yes.
You know, you got bridge. Like, songs don't have bridges anymore. You know, take me to the bridge. That's part of the song where it changes up a little bit, and then it connects you back to another part of the song. They don't do that anymore. Now, hip hop came along during, you know, it really started gaining steam during the disco era. What people doing during disco? Cocaine, piles and piles of cocaine.
Had to.
Right. So think about this. I don't do cocaine. I'm not a user of cocaine. But every time I see a depiction of people using cocaine, and I've been around plenty of people on cocaine. Let's keep it real. I've been around enough people who toot to know exactly what it does to you.
Yeah.
And to me, disco music is the total embodiment of cocaine high. You know what I'm saying?
You're right.
Up tempo. Like, I don't know if a lot of people realize that 120 beats a minute is almost in step with a heartbeat. So this is, you know, you hit this coat, heart's going 120 beats a minute, and you rocking 120 beats a minute to disco all night long. We get into a time when people start coming to a realization that cocaine is not so good for me, and it's expensive.
As hell.
So they start making cheaper cocaine.
What's that called?
Crack.
You know what I heard today?
What's that?
So fast forward, Freddie Gibbs dropped the album, and he has a track called CIA. Because all they gave us was crack, Instagram, and AIDS.
Hey, I've always said crack and AIDS is the worst thing that ever happened to America.
Instagram is running neck and neck to our community, at least. You know, Instagram is running neck and neck. And when I heard that, I was like, so that is. I thought about this episode when I heard that today, because I think we had the conversation about how detrimental the crack era was to our community, how it forever changed it, but what came out of it musically.
Yeah, what it did was, well, you think about the difference. You've seen people on powder and you've seen people on crack.
Right.
Same drug, different form of the same drug, different outcomes.
Yes.
First of all, I don't know too many crackheads that were making a whole lot of music, because you got about, once you start smoking crack, you got about another good 2 weeks to a month of being useful to society. If you're really a user,
right.
you're not going to be that productive.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm not saying that cocaine is a productive drug, but when people sniffing cocaine, they were making music and holding it together.
Right.
Which is why crack destroyed so many people. It let you know that we were coming out of the cocaine era because crack destroyed those people who used to do cocaine. There's not anybody who started smoking crack that hadn't tried cocaine when cocaine was out there.
Yeah.
You know, you're going past the coke, so you don't skip past the powder,
right,
and just put a flame to a rock. If you never experimented with the powder, it's what made those people comfortable enough to accept crack.
How low can you go?
You see what I'm saying? So when crack didn't ruin their lives, I mean, when coke didn't ruin their lives in the 70s,
right,
they thought crack was okay too.
Right. That's amazing, right?
But I would say this. I can relate to all those people, and I feel sorry for them the way it happened, because I can only imagine how our society would be turned upside down all over again if marijuana was released in a highly addictive form.
Like
everybody who smokes regular and is used to being able to stop whenever they want to, or used to spend a certain amount of money and then saying, hey, okay, I got a budget. And then imagine somebody comes out with a weed that's as addictive as crack.
They got it. Now,
and it would ruin all the smokers.
Absolutely.
And that's what happened to the dudes that sniffed powder when crack hit.
Right.
They wanted, I tried. I've been doing fine with the powder, so I'm going to try this. So what we saw in the music, that tempo, that up tempo that we were used to, started getting slower and slower, slowing down a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But the energy, there's an energy in crack. The energy was still there.
Right.
The tempo slowed down, but it was still a frenetic pace. You know, the energy was there. Like, you listen, I'm not saying that the people who were making the music were all smoking crack, but some of them were, you know what I'm saying? Like MC Shan smoked some. You know, a lot of artists from that era smoked crack. I'm not saying they smoked the crack while they were making the music, but this is the time period. And crackhead energy, you know, was in the music.
And then you had that mix.
What's that?
The crack and weed.
Oh, the Woolies. Yeah, but you know, that's that Wu-Tang era, and we getting there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But that period, what happened next is we start going from crack. Crack was popular amongst drug users, but it was never the thing to do. You know,
Hell no.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't coke.
But then later, weed had this big comeback.
Right.
When Cypress Hill came out around 92. So now we've been through the disco and the coke, and then, you know, the crack, the hip hop, the early days of hip hop, the golden years. And then you get to the weed smoking. And what weed smoking did when Cypress Hill came out, you know, like, I like to use everything in terms of beats per minute. You know, we started at 120.
Right.
By the time you get to the late 80s, not a lot of 120 anymore unless it's house music. And the rest of, even a fast song like Raw Bass, Easy Rock, it's like 110, 106, maybe 112, you know, Poison, 112. That's a fast song now, not 120 anymore for us, you know? And then you get to the point where Cypress Hill drops and they're talking about weed all the time, Dr. Dre's, the Chronic. You know, weed is the shit.
Right.
And it's not addictive, so it's becoming something that everybody's doing, and it's not ruining, you know, it wasn't ruining people's lives, so it became a socially acceptable drug. And here's what we know about weed. It's a depressant.
Yes.
And, you know, physical depressant, you know, so people smoke weed, they slow down, the music slowed down. All of a sudden, the Chubb Rocks, Treat 'Em Right, stuff like that, the up tempo and that dancing we used to do in the club in the late 80s and early 90s. I used to go to the club, DJ, and I knew that, you know, a girl would go to the club intentionally with her hair not done too well because she was going to sweat it out.
Right.
That's what we're looking at.
Yes.
energy in the club. Then the weed comes, the music slows down a bit. Think about by the time Smoking on Hay comes out. Smoking on Hay. That tempo is half the speed of disco music.
Right.
It's at 60 now instead of 120.
Okay.
We didn't do anything at that tempo in the club.
Yes.
Except dance to slow jams.
Yeah.
But now the hip hop has slowed down to 60 beats a minute. Absolutely unheard of before that.
Interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
And then, you get a whole run of music that's in that lane, Pastor Troy and Lil Jon, all of them, but this is 60 beats a minute now. And before that, like if I go back, I don't think I have a song that was 60 beats a minute in the hip hop genre before 1996, 97 maybe.
And music was slower coming out during the weed time too.
It took a while to come out, but that was just because of the label. It was just as many people rapping and recording. You just didn't get to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about because, weed left again, and you have those artists who were dibbing and dabbling back with the cocaine and these fast-paced drugs again, and then music, they start putting out more music.
Do you know what I thought? What I noticed too, though, when you start getting those guys mixing the drugs, you also started getting that questionable content.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, dudes are willing to say things that we never heard people talking about and saying before. You know what I'm saying? And it's that mixture of drugs when you start.
We listen to Old Dirty say,
Yeah. Now you going to tell me that he wasn't on a mixture of drugs.
And we listened to it.
Did we? It was dope.
Yeah.
Literally dope. You know what I'm saying? We were listening to the dope talk.
Yes.
But shoot, man, that weed slowed everything down, and then people want to mix it up for a little bit during the Wu-Tang era. And shoot, that gave us some interesting concepts. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of abstract, some abstract thinking going on in hip hop during that time, but it was short lived.
Mm-hmm. It was, with that Wu-Tang sound and that, I guess, that drug of choice by the producers. That's when you had somebody like I listened to Prodigy talk about. Havoc talk about producing some of that early Mobb Deep stuff. And I was like, he was getting high. You can't tell me he was just taking the different sounds, putting them together. And I'm not talking about musical sounds. I'm talking about
what kind of high? You think it was a weed high? Just plain old weed? Like when I listened to Mobb Deep sound, I didn't get the impression of a whole bunch of other stuff.
Weed and liquor.
Yeah, it sound like weed and liquor to me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Dark liquor too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. But I tell you what though, all the coke that we've seen people do and all this marijuana and then all this crack, things got quiet when meth popped up. Like I don't know what impact meth had on our music. I don't think it had any. Because it, wasn't our thing.
Right.
So it didn't. I didn't see a change in our music as meth rose to prominence.
Yeah, I didn't partake in the drug that he was rapping about. That I later on found out.
Who?
Meth.
Oh no, I'm not talking about Method Man. I'm talking about
crystal meth.
Crystal meth.
Oh no.
Nah. I'm talking about the meth. After the crack.
Molly.
You know what I'm saying? Oh man, we skip. Okay. Now that's something that I saw change the music. Those Mollies,
and through
that changed the music. It changed clubs.
What? And through conversation with people,
it brought house music back.
And a lot of people thought they were doing Molly, and they were actually doing meth.
Really?
Really?
I
Really?
I don't know.
I was surprised, and then I look at certain people who I know was doing Molly, and then other people, and just the physical part of meth. Yeah, they was doing meth. They might not have known they were doing meth, but they were doing meth. They weren't doing Molly.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I think that,
ecstasy was a happy drug. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't.
But when I see people on meth, they like crackheads on crack.
You
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know how everything's time 10 when you say it's on crack. So
Right.
they like crackheads on crack.
I don't think they had any success. Maybe an artist had success rapping.
No, I don't
about
know
it.
anybody who like meth is one of the things that But when you talk about the ecstasy era helped bring that techno back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Raves, hot popular, huge venues started. They came back into vogue. Before ecstasy. Now you had large clubs. You know, that they kind of died down from the disco era, and meth helped fill those venues back up. And even to this day, the popularity that the trance music and the techno and all that stuff, that popularity that was riding on the back of people on ecstasy, like when you look at how many people they squeeze into one place now just to listen to the music. Like when we're DJing, we might DJ a place, 500 people show up. I'm like, wow, it'd be 500,000. You know what I'm saying? 100,000 people in a stadium listening to a DJ.
Right.
And everybody's high on ecstasy and stuff like that. So, that definitely changed the music. It brought that particular tempo. It brought back the tempo of house music, but the intent was a little bit different. And, it's like, they're dancing, but, people high on ecstasy, they like the camaraderie, the social aspect of the whole thing. You see what I'm saying? It's like they just want to be around people and fellowship.
Right.
And it's the perfect, that drug for that particular music scene. It's perfect for them.
Now, at what point from your DJ stance did you realize that you could have possibly been promoting cocaine music or crack music or some of these other drugs?
There weren't a whole lot of people that promoted, every now and then, even when I heard Wu-Tang talk about the Woolies and stuff, like a lot of times it didn't feel like they were totally coming from a glamorizing viewpoint. You know what I'm saying? Some of that stuff felt more like either a report or a warning rather than a glamorization. But, later you start hearing cats just totally glamorize everything they do,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, when did this flip from how it was to how it is?
Who flipped it? Who you gonna give that?
Yeah, I'm thinking back right now. I'm trying to think who was the most open about their drug use.
Future.
That Percocet.
And hip hop,
Miley
Future.
Percocet.
Still to this day.
Right. And I when I first started hearing rappers talk about abusing prescription drugs and stuff like that, honestly, thought it was one of the worst things that could happen for hip hop.
Hell yes.
And it still is because,
Yes.
It's still in the us and them type of thing. That was always their problem.
Right.
And now here you go making their problem our problem, and you're part of that.
Right. You're the
We
bridge.
already have our problems.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty sure that anybody who, they would look at it and say, crack is their problem more than our problem.
Right.
Meth is their problem more than our problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's a problem still. It's an American problem. But these things go where they go. And I just kind of can't say that I can appreciate a man who's going to, your claim to fame, your legacy is bringing their problem to us.
Right.
Right. Now, I can see if you brought maybe the electric guitar into hip hop and made everybody start liking the electric guitar. But when you come bringing prescription drug abuse into the hip hop game,
right?
You know that's not, especially then the more popular you get, the more people think that's okay. Right. When traditionally, we as a people stay away from that hard line stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You know, think about the hip hop community, weed, drinks, little powder, seen some powder here and there, and we said, and the crack took a lot of legends out.
Yes, absolutely.
But other than that, you know, there's some heroin floating around out there, but a lot of the heroin cats just didn't get involved in music like that in our generation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So if that's what they were into, they weren't on our scene a lot of the time.
Right. Even the popular artists who dabble with LSD and acid and stuff like that, but their audience was different, even if they looked like us.
And I remember the Beastie Boys, when they came out, they were always, all their music was always about, we do whatever. Mm-hmm. But since they were them and not us, they didn't influence anybody.
Right.
I don't remember anybody in 1986, 87, 88 started doing dust because the Beastie Boys liked it.
Right.
But they talked about it all the time. Mm-hmm. They always getting dusted. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I don't get dusted.
Right.
But you fast forward and, you let somebody like Future or YG talk about getting dusted, and that would influence a young man in our community a little bit differently than hearing, Adam Horowitz talking about it. And, and people loved the Beastie Boys back then, but they just didn't, nobody in the hood was trying to dress like the Beastie Boys or do what they do, just like their music.
The first time
their influence ended in the sound.
The first time I paid attention to a hard drug like that being promoted was, my generation is a little bit behind yours, but Shaheem, and he had a track called Dust Juice.
That went on the first album, though, was it?
No, this was when he was a grown man, and hence he went to prison shortly thereafter.
Right.
Yeah, and I was just surprised that that's what music had come to.
Right.
Was that being acceptable? And
that used to be shameful.
Yeah. And
like, you never heard MC Shan make a song about smoking no crack.
Right.
Unless he was talking about how bad it was to be smoking crack.
The education.
So
yeah.
I don't know. A lot of things change in the community. The things that we used to look down on became acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And a lot of that gets us to where we are today, because once people started accepting those prescription drugs on the hip-hop scene, prescription drugs led us back to a heroin addiction.
Absolutely.
And now people involved in the music are on heroin too. And that's something that wasn't really a big deal for the hip-hop community. Of course, there's always been people doing heroin, so if you're from a place where everybody's on H, don't come and tell me that, well, here in Akron, Ohio, everybody's on it. I know sometimes, it could be like that, but in general,
right,
heroin wasn't a thing for us young people. You had a generation that had already had their battles with it, and I think what happens with drugs, they recycle themselves during the time that it takes for a generation to forget how bad it hooked up the last generation. Mm-hmm. So you give, we know crack, we remember what crack did, right. And we still have people in our generation that used to be crackheads and still trying to keep themselves together.
Right.
The moment those people get out of eyesight, crack will come back.
You think crack will ever come back?
No doubt. Everything comes back. You know what I'm saying?
Man.
Hey, man, racism. And look, overt racism came back strong like it's 1950 again. So what make you think that crack is going to stay in the closet? No, crack will be back. It just take, I thought you would have thought heroin would have been over forever, because the early 70s, the heroin was just as bad as crack. You see what I'm saying? But, so when we were young, in the late 80s, who thought about taking heroin? Nobody, because all you knew about heroin was that dude that you see leaning sideways with his eyes closed, that could barely stand up, is on heroin, and you had seen it before. You know what, and everybody you had known before crack who was a drug addict was strung out on heroin.
Okay, I hear that, and I agree with that. But the only thing that I would say about the difference between crack and all the rest of the drugs that we mentioned goes back to our earlier point of how the music changed with crack. Music slowed down with crack.
Yep.
The productivity.
We got money off of crack to put into our music, though, that none of those other drugs put money into our music like crack did.
But everybody who used that goes to my point. Everybody who used crack, you couldn't come up using crack.
No, if you're using crack, there's only one way to go.
Music.
I don't even think crack even has a medicinal purpose. No, straight up. When you think about opioids, people use opioids for painkillers, and then the painkiller don't work, and they got to go find some heroin. Well, guess what? If they had some pain and they had some heroin, the pain would go away. But where are we right now? We still in the Molly era, right? No, we passed Molly's. No, we moving into. Are we on opioids yet? Yes, we're headed to opioids because we're talking. Listen. If you're talking about the music and everything that Molly did with the rave parties and all of this, right? Fast forward, cats start taking opioids, okay? That is not a Molly. Now, I want you to think about the addiction. When we talk about the early years of cocaine and hip-hop, late 70s, if somebody is high on cocaine, powdered cocaine, what does that do to your performance? It sharpens things a little bit.
Yes.
So you go back, I'm not saying that all these people were high when they made these records, but I do know that a lot of these artists have come out and had problems with cocaine later.
Absolutely.
So when you go back and listen, to the music, listen to the diction, listen to the sharp on beat.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Everybody's rapping on the beat.
Right.
You know, if the beat goes like this, then the words go like this too. Every time the beat drop, the word going right with it. That's cocaine. Mm-hmm. Now these opioids.
Oh, mumble rap. Yeah,
what?
Mouth lazy. Yeah.
What?
Yes. But some.
And understand, come on, y'all keep locking.
Yeah.
Y'all understand, come on, y'all keep locking. That joint is on fire. But he ain't never lied. Like when you listen to mumble rap, man, that ain't dudes being creative. That's dudes so fucked up they can't open their mouth and finish their words.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You hear these dudes talk, they don't talk like that.
Productivity
when they're regular.
Is still there, though.
The productivity is kind of there because these guys didn't make the beats.
No, they just put in words.
And you don't even know what the hell they're saying.
Yeah.
You know what? I listened to Lil Uzi Vert, EXO Tour Life, one of my favorite songs ever. Mm-hmm. I ain't gonna lie, it's one of my favorite songs ever. Mm. I wouldn't even know what he was talking about half the time, were it not for the lyrics.
Oh, reading them.
Yeah.
That's why I don't listen to Future.
And I know that Uzi Vert doesn't have to use that diction.
Right.
Because he can be as clear as he wants to be.
Absolutely.
So what'll make a man say, what would make somebody talk like that on a song?
Right, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's not just him, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And you know all that complaining I talk about, they're not even on a beat half the time. Like the beat will come out going, the beat that's 60 beats a minute, and they come out rapping 135 beats a minute speed on it. Mm-hmm. And then every time the beat drop again, they got to reset. So every 4 counts, you hear these dudes reset.
Right.
Boom, boom. Boom, boom.
It sounds like Taz.
Boom, boom. Yo. And
a lot of punching in.
Hey, man.
Yeah.
That's where we are now. You know what I'm saying? It's heroin music right now.
Yeah, it is. It's an overwhelming number of it too. There is some, some good music out there. But
yeah, dudes talking about drinking lean and all that stuff. That's nothing but heroin.
Yeah,
codeine, cough syrup, like all this stuff. Anything with a dean or zine on the end of it, ain't gonna do nothing but slow you down. You know what I'm saying? And mess with your brain. Make everything slow. and it's just not, don't make the best music off of that stuff. Like what's lost in this era is all the creativity in the music, like the music rising and building up to a certain point and taking you somewhere else for a little while, coming back to that crescendo. You don't get that anymore. Right. It's just like, I got a beat, play it. I like that. I like that, man. What you just say? Oh, man, you heard me.
Right. The melody is the melody.
It's the melody.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But
Young Thugger, straight melody.
Boys ain't saying nothing. And I know they're saying something.
Right.
But the thing is, like, that's what happens when you get that high before you record. And it used not to be acceptable to be so high in the booth that we can't understand what you're saying and you're not on beat no more.
Right.
Dudes are getting away with it.
Well, I think that, opioids is a major problem on both sides of the coin. But when you look at, and I hate to go back to crack, but crack not only influenced or changed the music, because I think that's the most influential drug of my lifetime anyway that I've seen. No doubt.
It changed everything.
Yeah, man, and it spilled over into the community. It took the respect out of music, even though we are fans of that. It
took the respect out of our neighborhood because the men, it took the men out of our neighborhood, which also changed our music. Like crack had the biggest impact out of all these drugs because by the time they got finished making crackheads out of the half of dudes that was smoking it and making dope dealers out of the other half of the dudes out here.
Right.
Then all our dudes
right
are tied up somehow in this crack, which leaves a whole lot of kids to be raised by our women. So all of a sudden you start looking, we used to look like men and we were taught to admire manly things from manly men.
Hold up now, be careful.
I know, man. I'm just saying. I'm
be careful.
I'm being for real though. Like you taught your values from people you look up to, and when you look up to rappers, they're telling you what to value.
Right.
And when I was a kid, rappers told me to value gold. They told me to value nice cars.
Right.
Beautiful women. Being the best. That was a huge thing, being whatever it is, just be the best.
Right.
And that was something to value. Later, as the men disappeared, you got dudes coming out, they were taught by women what to value, and they put it in the music. They want you to value diamonds, expensive purses. Like dudes talking about purses and songs.
Yes.
Didn't no dude know what a Birkin bag was.
Right.
Back when dudes were on the street because they didn't give a fuck about that ish.
Right. Right.
Because it was just, who gives a fuck? But take the dudes out of the picture and your mother's teaching you what to value.
Right. Sure.
And, we know before, back in the day, kids, it used to be that diamonds were a girl's best friend.
Now?
Diamonds are for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Now, and because, there is no gender, that the people that used to teach gender roles were taken out of our community. So now we don't have gender roles. Dudes wear tight pants. We didn't wear tight pants before all the dudes disappeared. Because real OGs, had they been around, would never have allowed that to happen.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But you take the OGs out of the picture and you come popping out in the tight pants and your mom and your auntie's like, ooh, look at my boy. Yep. I like them pants. Where you get them pants? You see what I'm saying?
Whew.
So this is what crack did to the music and the imagery and everything. Once you get the male influence,
right?
The new influence is from the next closest dominating presence, and that's mom.
Absolutely.
And this is what mom likes, and so this is what we like now because this is what rappers talk about what girls like now.
Right.
Stuff that girls like. Think about the beefs that be going on. Like, I ain't trying to be funny now. Look at this internet beef. Dudes going back and forth on Twitter and all this stuff. Like, I mean, really. No, seriously.
I know, yeah.
Do you think if we had all the guys in the hood that crack took off the block, do you think that dudes would be into such petty ass
ish?
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Seriously.
Like, you know, you can almost tell what era dude was raised in by the things that upset him and the things that he's willing to go to war over.
Right. And I think that's why it hurt so bad when Drake said that to Meek.
What did he say to him?
He called him Twitter fingers.
Twitter fingers.
Yeah. He called him Twitter fingers.
See, but Drake had a daddy.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And, you know, it's crazy.
And if you look at, you know, there's something masculine about Drake. Yeah. That you don't see. Right. Like, you know, there's the presence of a father, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Look at Kanye on the other hand. Grew up with his mama, acts like an absolute girl. You know, and I'm not trying to insult women. I'm just saying that the things that trigger y'all don't trigger us, and the things that trigger us don't trigger y'all. Right. And the things that trigger y'all trigger Kanye.
Right. Right.
And he learned that from his mother.
Yes.
And hey man, I spent way more time around my mom. You know, my dad was somebody who got caught out there in the same situation. And I had to teach myself not to get upset about things that women get upset about, because as a man, that will get you killed.
Yes.
So I can't be rah-rah like my mother could. Right. And my mother is a firecracker. Uh-huh. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So.
And it damn sure will get you.
And she could get away with that, though.
Killed.
You know what I'm saying? My mother's beautiful. People gonna let her talk a whole lot of shit. But as a dude, I can't do what my mother does.
That's like the little boy who always got to have the last word. You can tell who's most influenced.
Who's influenced by their mother, because it's your father's man. I'm like, son, it ain't working. Come on,
yeah.
Need that. You know what I'm saying? You don't engage every barking dog when you got a man around.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But when you don't, you know, you will come out like that, and it takes you time out here in these streets. Sometimes it takes somebody else's father or somebody else's older brother to show, to kind of hold a mirror up to your ways and be like, look, you're acting like your mama right now.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? As personal as you may take it. You know what I'm saying?
Facts.
But these are the effects of the drugs on the music. You know what I mean?
Yes. So
and with crack, it's not just the smoking of crack that we're talking about affecting the music. It's the whole crack culture that took the men out of the community that changed the music. You know, nobody even thought about that.
Right. Right.
You know? So now here we are listening to music by a lot of people who have a heroin addiction, raised by women, short-tempered, petty. No wonder we got beefs and dudes dying all the time. Like rappers didn't get killed in the street all the time when there were men out there in the street to tell you what's worth getting that upset about.
Right.
No, before, like I said, before all these men were removed from the streets, I can only think of a few things that would definitely get you killed. Sleeping with somebody's wife, breaking into somebody's house.
Yes. Not just breaking in their house, but burglarizing their house.
While they're there.
While they're there at night. Or
you know what I'm saying? But those were the major violations.
And like, spitting in somebody's face.
And I can also say that when watching women during those times, seeing women keep beefs going with each other over some of the smallest, silliest things.
Right.
I've seen women who were best friends or sisters or cousins go 40 years without talking to each other till the other one dies.
Right.
Because she didn't
like that yellow dress.
Right. That she wore that yellow dress, and she know my husband.
Yep.
She wore that yellow dress in front of my husband, and he already said it was his favorite color.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? To be something silly like that.
Absolutely.
Every time you see a rapper get killed, man, it's a situation where if they had waited a couple of days, probably nobody would have got killed. Give it a little bit of time.
Right.
Like these instances, like what are some of the things people have gotten killed for? Let's take Tupac. Tupac he's a millionaire, and he was hanging with another millionaire at a fight that none of us can afford to go to in a city that none of us can afford to visit. Now, Tupac admittedly did not have his dad around like he should have, raised by a woman. So this millionaire who's at a public event that has everything to lose, has been in movies, feels like because he sees a dude, this guy didn't even steal Tupac's chain. It's a dude that stole a chain from somebody else.
Somebody else who wasn't even there.
He wasn't there when that happened. Is that some bitch shit all day?
Yes.
Dude, how many times have you seen a woman say, I don't like her?
Right.
Why? She don't like my friend.
Yeah.
You don't even know that bitch. And he saw that motherfucker.
Yeah.
I don't like him. Why? He fucked my friend up.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, take just one intelligent man,
right?
One OG off the street who's about 60 years old. If one old gangster with some sense,
right?
Been there, yo, Pop, you got too much to lose, baby, man. Fuck that chain.
Right.
And that's the kind of advice that we used to get on the streets. Even the winos used to sit on the corner, would tell you this shit like that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I remember going to get in a fight one time and I grabbed a knife or something. I remember just a OG from the hood was like, yo, man, you getting to ruin your life, man. Put that shit down. He told me to get in the car and leave.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's the power of a man being around at the right time. Because I was offended. I'm offended. I'm getting ready to do something crazy. Because that's what I learned. When women get offended, they get loud and start damn.
Yep. It's crazy you say that because, that's the thing now, that it's okay for a man to have or get in his feelings. And
we're too dangerous for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, that's why we don't fist fight as much anymore. The consequences are too dire for all of that now. So by the time you reach adulthood, you should be well beyond petty beefs because we're men, grown-ass men. You know what I'm saying? I can hit you hard enough to kill you with my fist. You see what I'm saying? Like, dudes go to jail probably at least a couple of times a week in America just from punching somebody who offended them. And then the dude hit his head or something and die. So as macho as even that sounds, can ruin your whole life. Just,
yes,
being petty and taking things personal. And it takes time to get over that.
I like where this conversation went for two reasons. Because it shows the importance of where we're at as a society and how we articulate this into music and culture and stuff. And the other side of it is there's so many what's the word I'm looking for? It was so many products of what was done to us by another community that it has so many lasting effects that for we
don't make love songs anymore.
Yeah, for somebody to say you got to stop saying it's because of what they did to us, but when this shit has a lasting effect, like it's not a short conversation because it's not a short effect of what happened. Right. It's very long term. So that's why this argument, and it's not an excuse, it's an argument. It's long lasting, and yeah. I think I think this episode right here went somewhere that initially I didn't think about it going, but once we start conversing about it, it shows the effects of it. Like we talked about all the drugs, but we ended up going back to crack because crack had the most. Yes, that's crazy.
And then we're still feeling the effects. Like,
damn. Drugs, man.
Drugs. Don't do them, people.
Damn.
Every drug has run its course already. You know what I'm saying? If they invent anything else, it'll like fentanyl. That'll kill you. Like anything they invent now, because technology only gets better.
Right.
Like, weed got better. Coke got better. Opioids got better. Like, you used to have morphine and stuff like that. Now you got fentanyl, which is 100 times more potent.
Right.
Like, you seen the police officer, he just opened the trunk, and there was some fentanyl in the trunk, and dude just passed out. Just because it was in the air.
They want it.
And cats want that in their system. Yeah. So it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
It's a lot. You know, this is, this has been a dope episode, man.
Yeah, man. The drug show. I tell you what, though, if I could undo anything right now, if we could go back and undo what happened with crack.
Yes.
You know, it would be it would put us in an amazing place because, you know, I'm old enough to have seen the advances we made after civil rights legislation. Mm-hmm. And, I think, like, Lyndon B. Johnson signing all that stuff, around 68, 69?
68, 69, yeah.
It was just 10, 15 years later, put crack in the hood and it undid that. So neighborhoods that you ride through today and in your lifetime, you've only known them as crack neighborhoods or drug spots or the trap or the hood. And there was none of that before crack.
Right.
No, none of the neighborhoods that you think are bad were bad before crack.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, of course, you had some projects that were pretty rough because they still had the same problems. But even projects, it wasn't all the projects back then.
Right.
Certain projects in certain cities.
Yeah.
But just because you lived in a project didn't mean you were dealing with drugs all the time, you know, and crackheads everywhere. You know, you had to deal with some of that stuff. But being poor did not mean you lived in a bad place until crack.
Right.
Crack made any place that...
It amplified it. All the problems in the community just got amplified by crack.
Right.
All of them.
Right.
You know?
So now, fast forward today, this is what we got, y'all.
Thank you to the CIA.
Yeah. Bunch of kids out here rapping, raised by their mama, sensitive, you know, with guns.
Right.
Easy access to guns. Using drugs that we never even considered, you know, never even thought about. Matter of fact, there was no oxycodone back in the day. You know, all this stuff is new.
Right.
You know, so if you wanted to get high like that, the only thing you had was heroin, and heroin has such a horrible reputation that it took oxycodone to make heroin popular again. The only reason people even sought or seeking heroin out is because they made oxy so much harder to get now. Mm-hmm. You used to be able to get oxy so freely. Nobody thought about heroin for years. Then, you know, the drug makers got in trouble. They got slapped on the wrist for putting all the oxy out there, and heroin stepped in and filled the gap. Mm-hmm. Now it's back. You know? And we got kids on the street with the pants hanging down off their ass. High on heroin.
They went to Afghanistan and got
shooting each other.
I
know I sound like an old person. That was my imitation of a grandmother. These kids running around the street, pants hanging off their ass, shooting each other, sniffing heroin.
Yeah, they do that too.
Yeah.
That would definitely get somebody killed.
Yeah. But we ain't doing none of that. This was a totally dry episode today.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a drink. I think we covered everything. That's all the drugs. That's everything that everybody smokes and sniffs and eats and swallows anyway, right?
Pretty much. That was it. You know.
Yeah, that's
on everything.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. It was all about the D to the R to the U to the G to the S.
Drugs.
I'm your host, Capital J. This is Capital City Podcast alongside my man,
DL Glass.
And we'll see you next week.
This is Capital City with Capital J.